Welcome, guys. Thanks for coming. We have a special guest today, Dr. Cate Shanahan, and I spent the morning with her. I've met Cate before, but let me tell you, she's a special treat today.
Yay! Thank you for coming.
So, just to briefly introduce her, Cate is a family physician, just like myself. She trained in the East. She started out in biochemistry. We found out today that we both were connected to the Robert Wood Johnson system during our years of education. And then we went to Arizona for medical school.
Yep, University.
Yeah, and then did some doctoring in Hawaii for a while.
Yep.
Now lives in California in Sonoma.
Yeah.
And got very much involved in nutrition. And she's written several books. Deep Nutrition is one of her most popular ones. But rather than me talk about her, we want to hear her. But maybe we could introduce ourselves, go around, introduce, and then we'll let Cate do some talking. So, of course, I'm Dr. Jeff Gerber. Hope you guys know me.
Yes.
I look up to what Cate does, so trying to be like her. So, go ahead.
I'm Selena.
Dave Polly.
You want to tell a little story about yourselves if you're interested?
There really is a story.
No, it's fine.
Well, about 5 years ago, my mother died. And I was on a downhill path. I was 100 pounds heavier than I am today, and on statins and blood pressure medicine, and pre-diabetic, and going downhill. I said, I got to stop changing. I did. And I changed doctors.
Smart move.
I'm Joanne Carroll. I'm a patient of Dr. Gerber's for about the last 5 years or so. Been the Carb high-fat diet. Lost about 30 pounds, which I managed to keep off for at least 3 years.
Nice. My name's Patsy Brown, and I met Dr. Gerber almost 2 years ago, but 2 years, March 18th. I had lost 20 pounds on South Beach, but I had, my highest was 250, and then I met him, and he's changed my life. I've lost 60 so far. I have another 40 to go, but I just started today to really push for it so I can be in maintenance. But I feel better. I got rid of the fatty liver, and I'm working on the metabolic syndrome issues, thyroid and whatnot, high blood pressure. But those will go. I know they'll go because I'm not going to let them be here.
Good.
I'm Marilyn Littman, and I'm 68 years old, and I am looking for, I've come to see Dr. Gerber a couple of times, and but I'm looking for ways to be able to enjoy food without gaining weight when you're this age. And it's always a challenge, because food is kind of like an addiction, I think, for some of us. And I think about it all the time, and I don't want to be thinking about it all the time. So,
And you said you lost weight already?
I've been at this weight for a long time, but I would like to be like 5. I'm still working on that last 5 pounds, and that seems to be the hardest 5 pounds ever. And I work out every day, and I think I do all the right things, but it seems like I got to find that key. And I was hoping that by coming to this group, I would hear something that would help me push me to where I want my goal.
I see.
Because there's a lot of knowledge in the room. And you can't do it by yourself. You really need support from others. Yeah, you really do need support. Whether it's 50 pounds or 5 pounds, it doesn't matter. It's still the same weight. And you need support from others.
Yeah.
I'm Peggy Hansen, and I have been seeing Erynn now about a year. It was a year ago last January that I came to see her because I was looking for a new lifestyle of eating because I was doing everything right, doing everything healthy. And I always do my air quotes because it's what everybody else seems to think is healthy and what we're taught is healthy. And I will say that chicken breast, broccoli, and brown rice put 25 pounds on me. And running. Exercising, that I found that running and cardio packs on the fat on my body particularly, and with that combination of food. So where most people would see that as healthy, it didn't work for me. I had thyroid problems since 2008 that we never really got evened out. And now, Erynn's last comment about my blood work is that it was lovely, and that's never ever been said about my thyroid, and it's working wonderfully. I took off that 25 pounds, and I'm able to maintain very well. And had found that keto in December of last year, and was on it for 3 weeks by the time I came in and saw Erynn. And so the whole year has been, half the year was keto, and then the second half of the year I've tweaked that up just a little bit, and that's working very well.
Wow, that's great. Hi, I'm Becky Jones. I'm Peggy's friend, and I haven't seen anybody here, but she keeps telling me I need to come here because I wanted to do this. You know, she's got me doing her thing, high fat and low carb, and so it seems to be working. Got another 10 pounds to go, but I guess I just want to figure out how to keep doing this and maintain and get that other 10 pounds off.
Hi, I'm Terry, Dr. Terry. I have my PhD in biochemistry, and I'm very interested in nutrition. And when I discovered the paleo diet, I took my amateur cooking, chef thing into kind of like an ancestral chef thing. And my partner and I have been paleo for a few years now, and I'm really happy with that. I'm now helping other people get converted from an agricultural to an ancestral diet. And I'm really delighted to be a part of this group. It's a lot of fun being around like-minded people.
I'm Tom, and I'm trying to do the high-fat diet. Doing pretty good at it. Doing better. New Year's resolution to stick to it more strictly. At 90% instead of 80%. So.
I'm Dave Jackie. I started with Dr. Gerber late last year and kind of bought into the whole high-fat, low-carb. Haven't really gotten good with having a menu ahead of time or really knowing what I'm doing. I pretty much bought into just eating eggs and sausage and butter and bacon fat in a pan and going with that. Perfect. And trying to eat fats. And so I'm a little frustrated that I don't know if I'm executing well. I don't know if I'm really doing it. But in the first couple months, I did lose about 17 pounds or so, which is great. But like I said, I don't know if I'm really implementing fully or not. And so I've been a little bit off the wagon, I'll say, through the last few weeks, so time to get back on.
Or during the holidays.
Yes.
Well, and then once you lose it, I will say I get that state of mind of going, well, I've definitely lost it because I did this and I did this, so well, I might as well have oatmeal today because I'm not going to get it before until I get back on the wagon. So I think I'm through all that now. So.
I'm Mary Greshka, and Dr. Gerber introduced me to the high-fat, low-carb a year ago last April, so it's been, a year and a half or so. And I was pre-diabetic and very frightened by that. And so I had a big incentive to improve my health, and it certainly worked. And I lost 35 pounds the first year, and now I'm maintaining. And yeah, I do cheat a little, and that's I eat Ben and Jerry's ice cream once in a while because Dr. Gerber eats Ben and Jerry's. I'm telling you, sorry, but anyway, overall I try very much to eliminate grains. Okay, pretty much eliminated grains, and working on the sugars. It's awfully hard to get rid of the sugars.
Okay, I'm Erynn. I'm the PA here, for those of you I don't know. I've been here since May of 2013 and been involved in paleo stuff for about 6 years. Just really love it for, making me feel healthier, and haven't really had a ton of weight struggles, but I've had some other health struggles that have improved with paleo, mostly gastrointestinal.
I'm Jackie, and I've been coming here since the beginning of October. And I had started, I'm pre-diabetic, and I had started low-carb real seriously back in July, and then came and saw Dr. Gerber, and he helped me figure out the percentages, and so I've been doing the keto one since then, and my numbers look a lot better, and I feel really good. And I did one cheat at Christmas. I had dessert at my daughter's. We were having ice cream cake, which would normally be a real big deal for me. Not that I ate a lot of it, but I mean, I love it. And I had a piece. I thought, okay, it's Christmas Day, and have one piece of ice cream cake. It's the only sweet I've had since I made the change, and it tasted horrible. I really don't need to worry about cheating again, I don't think, with anything that extreme. That just
Try
really...
the Ben and Jerry's.
No, I love Ben and Jerry's. I'm sure that I will at some point, once in a while, have a little frozen yogurt. That's one of my favorite. If I was going to have a sweet, that's normally what I would choose, not ice cream cake. But this really tasted horrid to me, and I was really surprised. So that was very good. That's why.
They do.
Yeah.
So, yeah, well, you mentioned keto, and Kate and I had a great conversation about ketogenic and terminology and to use it appropriately or not, so maybe that can lead us into a conversation.
I think one of the big things that everyone in here really wants is to be able to burn fat, right? And because you can't lose weight if you can't burn fat. I mean, you can lose weight, but you can't lose fat. So you got to be able to burn it. And the kind of diet that they tell us is healthy, the air quotes healthy diet, is so high in carb that it doesn't allow your body to use fat because you're busy stuffing it with carb. Different people have different susceptibilities to that. Some people can stuff their bodies with carb and still burn fat. Some people are just like that. And some people have to be very, very strict, or they will lose that ability to burn fat. And then that's where you start getting into problems, whether it's weight or blood test problems or health problems that aren't even like easily defined, like this thing, fibromyalgia. A lot of the underlying problem, one of the first things to go wrong with people is you lose your ability to burn fat. So what does that have to do with keto? Well, we don't have a real easy way to tell if you can burn fat or not. We don't have like a little breathalyzer that's super easy to use that just analyzes. You can actually analyze the gases you're exhaling and figure out what you've burned. But those things cost like $20,000, $40,000, so not a lot of doctors have them, and they require exercise and hard use. So the next best thing is ketones. If your body's got ketones, then chances are pretty good you're burning fat, because ketones come from burning fat. But they also can come from burning muscle. So it's not like the best ultimate, thing. It's a pretty good marker, but you can still show ketones in your urine or blood and not really be where you want to be metabolically. And you can also not show ketones in your urine. Some of you guys probably already know this. But actually be burning fat, just because your kidneys aren't losing the ketones, because your body knows that these are useful things, so it reabsorbs them. So there's a difference between being a fat burner and being in ketosis and having ketones in your blood and ketones in your urine. So they're all slightly different things. But what you really want is to burn fat. And the easiest, because we don't have a real great lab test, before the invention of lab tests, doctors had this thing called communication. And we learned in medical school that you're supposed to, 90% of the diagnosis comes from that and 10% from the other physical things that we do. So you can really learn a lot by just asking yourself the right questions about your appetite and how you do during the day with or without food. And that is a huge indication of whether or not you're able to burn fat. So one of the things that I do is I work with Mark Sisson, who does Mark's Daily Apple. He's kind of one of the original gurus of the primal paleo movement. Great guy. And so through his website, people can connect with me to consult with me. And since I've been doing this, I've had to, I can't order the labs or any kind of ketone strips or anything, so I really have to rely on the history, is what I'm getting at. And I found that probably 90% of people who even are following the paleo diet really strict are still not burning fat based on this history. And the real single question that's probably most important is that I ask is, when is the last time you went 12 hours during the day without eating or drinking anything other than water, and think about how you felt? And a lot of people say, I can't remember the last time I went 10, 12 hours in a day. And if that's you, then chances are really good you aren't burning fat, just because you're too often putting stuff into the system. And whenever you do that, whatever it is, even if it is fat, you put yourself in a different metabolic mode than when you're actually not eating at all and forcing your body to use those reserves, those dip into the fat reserves. And so one of the best tests that you can do to see if you're a good fat burner is just do that. Wake up, have a good breakfast, whatever you normally would have. And even if it's a really light breakfast, then just go 8, 12 hours, drink water, maybe have some salt if you start to feel dizzy. And you can literally just put salt on your tongue just for the purposes of this experiment to make yourself feel better. And if you start to feel weak and tired, you can't concentrate, that is because that's not just hunger, that's a metabolic problem. You're not able to access your energy stores. So that is a huge indicator that you've got work to do in your metabolism.
Is there anything you can do to kickstart?
Well, there's a lot of little different things, and so there's no one right answer. It kind of depends where you are. But if you tend to, one of the big mistakes people make is that they will have something before they work out. They will eat to fuel their workout. So stop doing that. That's going to really, really help. And then also what I recommend is just do exactly that exercise a couple times a week until it becomes easier. Just like any other exercise, right? If you're not good at it, do it again until you get better at it. It's really, conceptually simple, but it's true. It works. And in this society, we have food everywhere, and food is like such an outlet for social life and everything. Unless you're a smoker, then you can smoke. That's another social outlet. But I don't recommend taking smoke. But yeah, so it's everywhere, and we almost never go without it for more than 8 hours unless some really extreme thing is going on in our lives, and that doesn't always happen. And we need to do that. We just need to.
Can you comment on fasting through the night and into the morning versus starting in the morning and fasting during the day?
We're always asleep at night, so it's like we better not be eating at night. Well, right.
But if an all night fast doesn't work.
No.
And actually, I just did a fasting blood test on Monday with Dr. Teacher. And
it's not the same.
Right, but I noticed in the morning I wasn't hungry. And I came in for the blood test and I still wasn't hungry. And I went, wow, okay, I don't have to have breakfast.
That's really good.
And right, so it's like, okay, that's cool. But I don't know if I would want to risk a blood sugar drop or an energy level drop, let's say, during the day if I really have to perform. But if I do a night into the morning and see how far I can go before I have to eat.
Yeah, you could absolutely do that too. There's no wrong way to do it as long as you're awake and active for a good 8 to 12 hour period while you're running on your reserves. Because while you're asleep, it's not the same. I'm not a sleep expert by any means, but everything about our body is so drastically different while we're asleep. So, yeah. But so I have a couple of folks where I suggested they do exactly that, have like an early dinner, because for whatever reason they could not take the chance of not eating during the day if it didn't work out well for them. And so I said, just have an early dinner and just see how long you can go, and then let me know. That's a really good phase one.
Dr. Cate, so as the introductions went around the room, a lot of people were talking, I'm doing a high-fat diet. Is that what we're supposed to be doing, eating as much fat as we possibly can consume?
So yeah, we talked about that during lunch too, right? That's a good conversation. So yeah, no, I mean, mostly what we want to get is as much nutrition really as possible. And so my husband wrote the books with me. Our book's called Deep Nutrition: Why Your Genes Need Traditional Food. And he really helped me kind of make sure there was as much just like common sense coming through as possible, because his take on all this is, what is the big deal? Why is this so complicated? Why do we have to have, books and books about what to eat when, 200 years ago there was probably one book about what to eat?
The paleo people, they didn't have any books at all.
Yeah, exactly.
They didn't even concern themselves with counting calories or any of this stuff. That's what I'm saying. It wasn't difficult for them.
Exactly. Right. So that's what we really want is we want to find food the way that people did, and the way people did it was totally instinctive, and that was the human part was our instincts, meaning our tastes and our cravings and what tastes good to us, and when we were hungry and when we weren't, and the natural world part. Which means, what was in season, when, and what animals we could literally just physically catch and hunt and cook and whatever else we did. And so in our book, what we did was we just refined down what everybody used to do to live off the environment in that natural way. And so that's all we're really after. We're not after a certain ratio of fat to protein to carb. We're after the maximum nutrition that the environment can give us. And that does tend to reduce your carb. And because of our carnivorous histories and the way that foods taste good to us are typically profiled, they do have a lot of fat, right? Like if you just look at a sesame seed, what's the macronutrient breakdown on that? It's like mostly fat, then comes protein, then comes carb. And that, like mostly everything that we would eat that tastes good to us without a lot of modification, apples taste good too, but we can only eat so many of them, we get sick of them. And they weren't in season. They weren't available the way the apples today are not the apples of yesterday. So anyway, so there's a macronutrient ratio that stuff that we really really crave tends to have, and so we can mimic that a little bit. And it does tend to be pretty high in fat. Then comes protein, and then comes carb typically. But a lot of folks have come to me after reading a bunch of blogs and listening to talks, and they get the idea that as long as we cut our carbs, we can eat as much as we want, right? It doesn't work like that. Or that you just need to pile fat on top of your normal diet, and then suddenly you're going to be burning fat. So, no. Either.
Right. Well, thanks for clearing that up.
Put extra butter on the vegetables.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
using coconut oil to cook in. The good oils. I mean, that's all.
Exactly.
Adds to your fat.
A variety.
Intake,
If you aren't using coconut oil, think about adding it sometimes. It's because you want to have the variety in as many things as possible that are natural. Right? That's why the snack food industry, they take advantage of that. We want a variety in as many things as possible, but they're just selling us corn and sugar and corn oil and salt in 50,000 different ways. So.
Were there any nutrition insights when you lived in Hawaii? Something specific to the islands?
I think the biggest thing that when I lived in Hawaii for 11 years, and that's where I kind of overturned everything I had learned in medical school. The biggest thing that, to me, the most fun thing was that the folks there that, the Filipino folks that were on the south side of Hawaii, where I lived, that loved food, that were into cooking, they were into traditional cooking and into traditional food, they lived off the land. They raised their own goats, they caught their own fish, they raised their own vegetables, they went hunting for pigs, and they were into every single aspect, making the most of all of it. And I just had so much respect for how they just did that, in addition to their other 2 or 3 jobs that they would have to sustain and be able to live. high. They just like built all that hunting and cooking and food prep into their, and gardening into their lives. And it was the center of it. You know, they had family, what do they call it? Potluck. That's what it was. Potluck this weekend. That was the big thing. So that's, you know, that and they used every part of it, and they were so proud of their family recipes that was inspiring and educational to me, because, you know, when we come out of medical school, we learn that, well, what's good for you is like fiber and things that don't have fat, salt in them, or flavor.
Now, Pan-Asians, you know, cook with a lot of taro, and I thought there was an obesity, well, there is an obesity issue in the islands, archipelago.
Yeah, you know, the reality is that that taro, so taro is a root. It's kind of like it grows under the ground. It's kind of remind me of when I first thought of a beet. It's a big, colorful bulb and lots of pretty leaves on top. And so what the Hawaiians did with that, they actually did a lot of processing. It was kind of a processed food almost, but so they would cook it, then they would like allow it to dehydrate and pound it into a powder, and then they would store it that way for a long time. It was kind of like for when there wasn't fish or something. It's just going to go on forever. Just turn it off. Then what they would do is that what wasn't done, they would then ferment it. So when they needed to eat it, when there wasn't enough fish or when the hunting was bad, they would take this stuff out of the storage stuff, and then they would rehydrate it and let it sit for days and days and ferment it, so that it had a lot less starch because of the fermentation process. And it wasn't a staple, it was sort of like a condiment, really.
Yeah. So is the problem taro, or is the problem westernization of their diets?
She's talking to herself, her own conversation.
So is the problem, you know, westernization and other foods that have been introduced into Hawaii?
The problem with Hawaii?
Yeah, and the obesity.
The problem is, I think it's the same as the problem on the Indian reservations, where it's the poverty, and they get the food that they get for free is processed white food. Yeah, I think that's a big problem.
So there are a lot of government subsidizing, like with the Native Americans in Hawaii?
Yeah,
I wasn't aware of that.
but honestly, the Hawaiian population was invisible almost to me. Most of it was the people who have come in there since. When we went to Hawaii, it was worse than what we did to the American Indians here. Like 90% of them died within the first few years, whereas it took a lot longer for us to kill off a smaller percentage of them here with all of our smallpox and they did it on purpose. They say, the historians say that they did, because by the time that Captain Cook got to Hawaii and they wanted to colonize Hawaii, they had already learned their lessons from what we did to the Native Americans here, and they knew how to give them the blankets and make them sick. So.
Whoa, aren't we wonderful people?
So there's not a lot of Native Hawaiians. I mean, and they're almost nobody is pure Native Hawaiian.
So Dr. Gerber, a question. I heard kind of natural foods, and you would get the right mixture of protein, carbs, etc., like in your nut example or seed example. So that makes sense. But in paleo, I thought it was mostly protein, anti-carb, pro-protein. I don't know. But Dr. Gerber, we talked about like 80% fats for me, maybe 10 protein, maybe 5 carbos. And so I'm trying to understand that message versus your message of just go the natural route.
I think the bottom line might be the same. I mean, the messaging might be slightly different.
Yeah. If you want to share with us some of your medical issues, there's a method to the madness.
Okay, so I think I was in your scale pre-diabetic 4 out of 5. My glucose was super high on the glucose test. My history is super low cholesterol, like 170, but my triglycerides are like 500 or 600. So my HDLs are really low, lack of exercise, whatever. So that's kind of where I'm at. So I've noticed eating the bacon fat and the eggs, and I can probably go 12 hours without eating after breakfast. But I still struggle with the high protein count. I have this perception without knowing paleo that paleo was based higher protein. And if I'm 10% protein and 5% carbohydrates, I'm struggling with how do I get a meal plan that executes that without killing some goats and growing stuff in my backyard, I guess.
Well, you can make the argument that you're adhering to something that is paleo. You know, it's just a higher fat version. It's 10% protein is kind of low.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty low. So you have to think about that. There's an absolute requirement for some protein in the diet, but you know, you just have to monitor clinically to see metabolism, check the markers, see how you feel, and if things improve, then by all means continue with what you're doing. But I mean, for me, when people say paleo primal, it brings in the aspect of eating, you know, unprocessed natural foods, and we all should be trying to do that. And it's not necessarily about the macronutrient ratio. It's about, you know, the quality of the food, the nutrient density, deep nutrition.
Right. Eat for nutrition instead of fuel.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So what do you recommend as the tool to measure your daily execution of, trying not to use a ratio again because you're trying to steer from that, but
Well, I think it's perfectly okay to use a ratio when you're trying to educate yourself, you know, at what are you roughly aiming for? You know, you do need to get scientific at some point. You need to like get nerdy or whatever about it and try to understand what you're doing so that you can, you know, see what is or isn't working. You know, if you have a problem and what you've been doing isn't working, then that's where it is important to drill down into some of the numbers and the macronutrient ratios. But what I was referring to is like our basic philosophy is that there isn't like a one, you know, you need to have this macronutrient ratio, everybody needs to do that all the time, and that's the magic number, and if you do that and don't pay attention to anything else, then everything will all be fine. No, not really. There's a lot of flexibility in biology, and what my husband and I like to talk about is just sort of like using the instincts and getting the joy of it so that the cooking should be fun. Because what I hear a lot is what folks, when they first start, like you, they're like, well, I understand this much of it, and then it becomes a little repetitive, and then because you're not sure what else you can do, and then you get bored of it, and then you fall off the bandwagon. So for that reason, that's where I like to have the message of, look, if it's too strict, then it's not going to work either. And just remember, there's no one magic number. It's about learning about what your body wants and where your metabolism is damaged and where it's not, and working from there. And so you might go through times where your diet is very different than it is 6 months later, and all of those things can be working for you or can fail to work. So that's why it's important to, you know, come to get expert guidance, basically, because if some people can do this on their own. Some people can read a book and they can lose 100 pounds and have everything wonderful happen to them, and they never needed help, and they just did it all by themselves. And some people do the same exact thing, and they're exactly where they were, and they don't know why. So the more you are in that second category, the more you need to get scientific about it. You need professional help, you know, just like anything. So there's benefits for learning more about the macronutrients, and just don't want you to get lost in it. That's our message.
I would like to suggest too that for me it was experimenting. So you start at one spot, and then if that's working, like it worked until it didn't. And so I learned what I was doing was, once I had dropped, it was like between 10 and 15 pounds, my fats were too high. I didn't adjust. I needed to adjust those back down, because then I started gaining, and I gained 8 after I had lost 15 without thinking I'm kind of an experiment. I have to experiment what works, and when you reach a certain point or maintenance, you may have to tweak that. So what worked at the beginning may not work in the middle or towards the end. And so it's really not like she said, this is everybody's macronutrients, because your body's different from mine. and so our macronutrients might be different. So what I tried to do is I experimented for 4 weeks. I chose something I was going to do, and I didn't change it at all for at least a month to 6 weeks, and see if that was working, because you can't really tell in a week or 2 weeks or even 3 weeks. So give it a good month to 6 weeks, and then if that's working for a long time, and then you realize it's not, something may need to be tweaked because you're further along, and maybe you've dropped some more body fat, that might need to, but everybody's different. And so you have to find, in my opinion, your structure, what's working for you, and kind of keep on top of it. But you have to find that place to start. And
you
then
implemented a change to your plans. Were you measuring daily your percentages of what you were eating?
when I first started, I got really caught up in that. And then you realize what you can eat and what you can't, and really what it looks like. So if at first to track it works really well for you, then I would say track it, but don't get obsessed over it, and making sure that your numbers are exact percentages, because I did that and it didn't really work, did it? and so just being a little bit more relaxed about it, knowing what you can eat and what you can't eat, just keep it really simple, of those healthy fats, or your bacon, your sausage, your eggs, whatever, where some people wouldn't classify those as healthy fats as we might, but eating when you're hungry too, I found worked for me, and not being caught up on how much of this number did I have today, but did I have the right foods and maybe the right amounts that made me satisfied, and then not eating again until I was hungry again.
Mary, I bet you don't track anymore, right?
I don't.
Because you know exactly what works for you at this point. You've done it long enough. And
I do.
So it's just time.
But I cheat.
Well,
I cheat. But yeah, I couldn't get in. I tried using the MyFitnessPal, but it just didn't work with me. I just, so I haven't, done much tracking. But since I was, followed or tried by reading the labeling and stuff, of staying, with those numbers, that ratio of, I think it was 70, 20, 10, I believe it is 70, 20, 10 that you suggested. And then you just, it becomes a habit. And you said eat an avocado every day, which I did in the beginning. Every day I'd eat an avocado, and that was a wonderful food to have in the morning. I'd do workouts twice a week and things like that. But I wanted to ask, because it seems like, it's so important for us to become tuned into our bodies, know how they're reacting to what we're giving them. It's an individual thing that we really need to do, and of course we know that when we're this big, we pretty well know, but by the time we get to this big, we've lost track of that, for whatever reason, socialization, all kinds of things.
Advertising.
Oh, gosh.
Too much information.
Oh, gosh. I'm wondering if you know at this point in time, if there are studies going on to try to connect someone's genetic makeup with nutrition, and be able to go and have these genetic tests say, this is what you need to eat. This is the balance. This is what you need to eat, because this is what your genetic makeup is telling. Are there any studies, or do you think this would be helpful? Or I guess I'm looking for a magic bullet. I'm looking for a magic bullet.
Very reductionist in thinking, and that's
Genome testing.
Yeah, there's a lot of testing out there, but what they're looking for with the testing is basically mutations. So, they're looking for indications that you may not be able to metabolize a certain food, or maybe need more of a certain vitamin or something like that. They're looking for, what about you is different than, is a reason to tweak, the basic standard advice, or this basic standard, vitamin content or something like that. But yeah, so there's been a lot of sort of like eat right for your genotype, or eat right for your kind of ideas out there, and I don't think that there's a lot of validity to any of them for a lot of reasons, but one of the simplest ones is just that we've mixed so many we've mixed and moved, and people are a species on the move. You know, didn't realize it, but you know, indigenous people, they would move thousands of miles, just like elephants. They go thousands of miles a season. Well, people were like that too. A lot of the reason was because we were hunting these animals that move so much. So there's so much mixing that we never really had a chance to specialize and become like the koala bear, where the koala bear, the specialists, they eat eucalyptus leaves, right? So that's kind of what they eat, right? For your genotype diet is getting at a little bit, like, you know, are you some sort of a specialist somehow? Well, the answer is I doubt it, because it doesn't make sense with our genetic, you know, past and our history and of humanity. We just didn't specialize. We never, you know, if we did, we'd be different species. So, and we're not. But it's not to say that there's not consequences. So some people use the fact that, oh, well, there's these people, like this one group of people, the Kitavans, always come up because they eat a lot of starches. So there's people that live in the hills of Peru, and they eat a lot of potatoes with singular diet. Well, there's consequences to changing your macronutrient ratio. And if you just look at the Kitavans, almost none of them are over 5 feet tall. They have a very low protein diet. Their skeleton doesn't develop the same way, and that's a consequence. It doesn't mean that we should do that or that they're adapted for it. It means that there's a consequence. It's kind of like taking a plant and putting it in sun or putting it in a closet. That plant is not going to adapt very well to being in the, you know, the genes aren't any different because it's been in the closet. And
But
it
its
doesn't.
appearance will change.
What's that? Its appearance will change, yeah. So it's kind of more like that. We're not really, you know, able to adapt on demand like that without having massive die-offs and basically subspeciating.
Were the
We don't want that.
Were the Catawbans specialists in a sense? Is that what?
Oh, well, they maybe would become if more generations to go. Like there was this. Did you see that special about like the Hobbit? It was like a human skeleton that was this tall on an island somewhere in the Philippines, and they're talking about this is the species. They thought it was like, you know, very different from humans or distinct or whatever. It was basically identical DNA. It was only 18,000 years ago. It wasn't like some ancient thing. So, I mean, to me, it's just like, well, what happens when people really restrict their protein for generation after generation after generation? Their skeletons look different. You could, if you didn't test their DNA, you would think they were a different species, but those are actually the same thing. It's the same. It's just it's the consequences of this restricted diet. So there's consequences, but I'm not sure that there's really true, like, adaptation that occurs within a species, because then you're talking about a different species. That's just my take on it.
Well, you're talking about the difference between evolution and adaptation, and that's huge, and most people don't get that. A layperson doesn't get that, so that's a tough one to get across.
Yeah, and it's confusing, and people have used that to sell books. Well, people will use that to confuse you and tell you that your genes are, you know, based on this test, you need to follow my special diet, or buy my special supplement.
I just want to add that genetic testing there's just associations, and we have to think about the penetrance or the expression of a particular genetic mutation or phenotype. And there's nothing concrete across the board. You know, one thing I always bring up is the BRCA breast cancer gene, that there seems to be this really strong association between the gene and you know, cancer. And a strong association means that it's an association, but you can't find any other cause to explain the phenomenon. And so we're still in the infancy in terms of clinical application of these genes and how we would change our diet, or how it would tell us what diet would be good for you versus mine.
So I still have to keep figuring out how my body is reacting, even though I lost that many years ago. Try to read what's happening, plus consult with experts.
Well, I think you've been listening the last couple years to your body, and you've done a great job.
Yeah. 3 siblings with, type 2 diabetes. one's already died at 70, and 2 more that are, overweight toward obesity. And I said, I don't want that. It was scary enough to me that I had the incentive to do it. So.
Mary,
Thank you, Dr. Gerber.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Mary. But you're interesting because when we had first met, you had no idea that I did this crazy nutrition stuff.
No, I didn't.
No, and I suggested it.
Exactly.
So
And I was so happy when he said, I'm nutrition oriented here. I was just so delighted to know that. So, thank you.
What would you say to the people when in looking at a diet like this? Because I'm sure it's a very common question, being that we've all the information that's out there in the healthy diet, that eating a high-fat diet or a higher fat diet with the saturated fats is causing, I've heard people say, oh, you're going to have a heart attack and your cholesterol and, all this stuff, and yet studies are showing that most of the population don't know about, like with keto clarity and things like that, that it actually helps the cholesterol, in turn lowering all that, removing the carbs. What would you say to somebody taking a look at this and going, well, I have family history of high cholesterol, family history of heart attacks, family history of high blood pressure, all this kind of stuff, and to help them kind of realize, like I have friends that they switch to this and their parents tell them all the time, you're going to have a heart attack.
That's mine.
And die.
Right.
I mean, because it that's out there. But yet this is the first time, like I'll tell people, this is the first time in 5 years my husband's had his blood work done, and Erynn didn't say one word about putting him on a statin. And he was only on this way of eating for about 3 months. I mean, he's borderline, but he's always been over. My cholesterol is actually higher than his, and mine's never been a problem, ever. And so I know that there's that many people out there that have that concern.
Oh yeah, that's a huge issue, and basically it's your belief system, right? Your belief is that because it's never like proof, right? I mean, a real scientist would say there's no such thing as facts. There's only like a moving hypothesis or something like that. So it's what's your belief system, and if your belief system is different than your friends or your family, there's always going to be friction. It's no different in food than it is in politics or your favorite color. How you want to decorate the living room. So on some level, it's like some people are just never going to agree with you, but I think it may help to get to the core of the argument, which is what we're seeing in this whole movement is that we believe that nature knows best. What the other side is saying is they believe that nature makes a lot of mistakes and that mankind has discovered better. That's why we need to suppress our appetite, right? That's why if we seek fat and we love salt, but we can't eat those things. They're nutty. So that's the core of the argument. And so if you just want to cut to the chase, you just say, look, where we're coming from is that nature knows better. What the other side that happens to be more popular right now in this country and a lot of places in the world is saying that no, nature is flawed and we have to come to the rescue and fix it. And so then if you can present that as the core of the two different arguments, then people can figure out what really resonates with them. And there are people out there, believe it or not, who say, no, I think nature is flawed. But when you put it to them that way, there's not as many as when you go the roundabout argument and try and talk about proof and science and all the stuff that is fun to argue about and makes for great talk show commentary and all that kind of stuff. But really the core of it is where is your core belief, and that's...
So basically just how it's worked for you. Like I can say blood work. Blood work is way better than it's been previously.
That's evidence,
eating.
right?
That's kind of what I was looking at. Is you guys do have that evidence. You have patients who you have seen cholesterol come down or triglycerides come down, or and I think it's the same thing. There's that consequence too that you can't eat the high fat and the high carbs.
Right.
That I think doesn't that create the disaster for some people? Isn't that the disaster that is created is eating the high carbs with the high fat?
Depends on your genetics.
And what else?
And it depends on, you know, your body. So, I mean, I'm not saying that everything is in general, but if it's working for somebody, it's not necessarily, if somebody had high cholesterol, high blood pressure, heart attacks in their family, would you still suggest a high fat diet?
That was me.
Okay.
Both of my dad's brothers have died of that, and both of my younger and older brothers have had heart operation. And I was going down the same path. I said, I've got to do something different than they're doing.
Right.
And I said, I can't listen to my doctor because I'm just getting worse on not him.
Right.
But
Right.
I found him through another blog at the Jimmy Moore site. And I finally said to my old doctor,
Right.
you're helping me, and I'm not going to listen to you anymore. And I got to find somebody that believes in what I believe in. Because, I mean, I have yet to prove that it's been better, but I feel and look a lot better than I ever did before. So.
Well, and I guess that's kind of the point, because to somebody, you know, like my belief system is totally there. I'll eat this way forever. I completely do. And to have the blood work, or to have the health, or to say I could gain 25 pounds on broccoli and brown rice and sweet potatoes, I did. I just did. It didn't work for me. Not that I try to convince anybody or argue, but when it's working for somebody, to have somebody, you're going to have a heart attack, you're going to have a, you know, you're right. I like that your belief system, if it's there and you feel better and you're doing better, then that's,
Yeah, I like Kate's challenging argument to people that question. But to bring some maybe science into it is the nature side of it tells us that nature wants to improve the quality of our cholesterol, reduce inflammation, reduce oxidative stress, and that counters kind of modern medicine, which is saying, no, we don't know anything about inflammation and oxidation. We're just trying to reduce the amount of cholesterol that's in your body because we happen to see it growing within the plaque of the blood vessel wall. So therefore, the cholesterol and the lipoprotein must be the problem. And so, you know, this is where we go back and forth. And so mainstream looks at the quantity of cholesterol. And this natural approach is looking at the quality of cholesterol. Now, in some, it's a matter of interpreting lipoprotein and metabolic markers, such as highly sensitive CRP, fasting blood sugars, the whole lipoprotein profile. Because some people go on these whole foods diets and the cholesterol goes up. And it's not a temporary thing. It actually can be a prolonged thing. But then mainstream would say, well, your cholesterol's too high. And then on the other side, we say, now, wait a minute. Let's look at the quality and the oxidative stress. Let's look at inflammation. And lo and behold, those numbers usually look good. Not for everybody. There's not just, it's not black and white. There's not no two sides to the story. So that's where the controversy lies.
so again, back to experimenting and what works for you.
Yeah.
Great. I think diet is all in context.
It's funny, my dad had an analogy back a long time. And the thing about averages, and so many doctors in medical school and all science, we all talk about averages, and averages don't really tell you much. And to illustrate that, if you had a pan of boiling water and a pan of freezing water, you put one hand in each of them, the average would tell you you're comfortable. And I don't think you will be. That's what my dad told me. He said, you're not comfortable. Okay, so we're all different. Just because the average comes out to this, it doesn't mean that you're going to be comfortable.
Everybody's an outlier.
So Dave, we talk about absolute risk and relative risk, and that's what this refers me about. So relative risk is your story about, you know, hot and cold, and you're fine in the middle. But when you look at absolute risk, it's your specific story that has nothing to do with anyone else in the room.
Exactly right.
And so those relative statistics of which we base most of modern medicine on don't apply to the majority of the people.
Right.
Right. It's a huge problem.
Well, and I don't even know how they come up with what's the average blood work. Is there an average person out there? I mean, they take a big sample, but who are they? I mean, how many of them are already sick or not sick? Or
Well, that
I
was
don't
part
know,
of
we're
my
comparing
problem.
our numbers to
Yeah.
something, and what is it doing? What is it?
Right.
I don't know.
I mean,
I
Erynn
mean,
was
it's
at
relative
least
to what it was, you know, mine from today versus a month or 2 months or 3 or whatever.
That's right.
Relative, but
Mm-hmm.
other than that, what does it really tell?
Well, because my doctor before I met Erynn, your thyroid, you're in range. Okay, what does that mean? I'm in range. I feel like crap. I'm gaining weight. My hair's falling out. My eyebrows are falling out. I have no energy. What does that mean? But because the blood work said I was within a normal range, I was fine.
Yeah.
And
He wasn't
I don't
looking at
do
the
well at
symptoms,
normal
it was-
range. I do well way far down. I did way better. But she was able to work with me and get that right for me and not for the average. So you're absolutely right. Yeah. And that you guys listen. Nobody else would listen to this.
Problem is,
Well,
there's
you're
not a lot of
normally
money in
fine.
nature.
Yeah.
They want to feed you
Right.
drugs.
Right.
And all
Yes.
these modified foods and all this stuff. That's where the money is.
So what about that modern medicine keeps us living longer?
Living
Look at that
longer
question.
with more debilitating diseases
Okay,
and pouring more money into your body with all the medication.
lots of expense, poor quality of life.
I'd rather live 10 years less and have better quality of life.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're not trying to live forever, just as well as we can while we're here, right?
But we try to blend things together here, as you
No, I mean
know.
not forever.
And so, you can go from one side to the other like hot and cold in terms of functional and a more traditional approach. But we think that there's benefit to both sides. Yeah, and you have to find the balance. And we're willing to at least look at it. So, yeah. So, well, maybe this would be a great time to finish. It's an hour. Thank you, Dr. Cate.
Thank you.